are none, may I take it then that the committee is ready to adopt draft resolution L31 Rev 1? If there are no objections, draft resolution L31 Rev 1 is adopted. Are there any delegations that wish to make a comment after the adoption of draft resolution L31 Rev 1? It would seem that there are none. The committee has thus concluded its consideration of agenda item 19I.
J'invite à présent la Commission à reprendre l'examen du point 20 de l'ordre du jour.
I now invite the committee to resume its consideration of agenda item 20 in order to take action on the draft resolution entitled Implementation of the Outcome of the United Nations Conference on Human Settlements, Habitat 2, and Strengthening of the United Nations Human Settlements Programme, UN Habitat, which is before you in document AC268L61 and submitted by the distinguished Vice Chair, Mr. Waruna Sri Dhanapala of Sri Lanka, on the basis of informal consultations on draft resolution L14. In this connection, I wish to consult the committee with a view to proceeding immediately to take action on draft resolution AC268L61. Since the document has only been circulated this morning, it would be necessary to waive the relevant provision of Rule 120 of the Rules of Procedure of the General Assembly. Unless I hear any major objection to this, I will take it that the committee agrees with this proposal, which is so decided. In connection with draft resolution L61, I would like to draw the attention of the committee to the statement of programme budget implications contained in document A/C2/68/L53 and submitted by the Secretary General in accordance with Rule 153 of the Rules of Procedure of the General Assembly. Does the facilitator, Mr. Tam Bok Chien of Singapore, wish to make a statement? You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the Bureau as well as my PR and DPR for having the confidence in me to facilitate this resolution. I also like to thank my colleagues for their friendship, advice, constructive attitude, flexibility, and above all, for coming together to enrich the resolution. They include the G77 as represented by Fiji, China, Kenya, and Ecuador, the EU and its member states represented by the UK, Sweden, Germany, the US, Canada, Japan, Mexico, Norway, Russia, and the Holy See. I also like to thank the UN Habitat for its support, assistance, and advice. The reason why I need to thank all of them is because I was facilitating a resolution for the first time. In my view, it was a resolution with several difficult political issues. The most divisive of which is operative paragraph 4, which I like to stress is a very delicate political compromise by all sides and represents the middle ground in the room. And if I may to read it out, operative paragraph 4, reaffirm the Governing Council of UN Habitat Resolution 24/14 on the inputs and support required for the preparatory process of the United Nations Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development Habitat 3 to be met by regular budget and voluntary contributions, and in this regard encourages the Secretary General to seek voluntary support for this purpose and calls upon member states to provide such support. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Je remercie Monsieur Tam Bok.
I thank Mr. Tam Bok Chien, who facilitated the text. I thank him for his efforts, congratulate him for bringing the consultations to a successful conclusion, and I thank him for those efforts in particular on the text that he mentioned. Are there any comments on draft resolution L61? It appear not. May I take it that the committee is ready to adopt draft resolution L61? I hear no objection. Draft resolution L61 is adopted. Does any delegation wish to make a statement after the adoption of draft resolution L61? Fiji, you have the floor, Fiji.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the outset, let me echo your sentiments and that of other delegations in expressing the group's condolences to the government and the people of South Africa, and to express that we stand in solidarity with them in mourning the passing of a great statesman in President Nelson Mandela. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Group of 77 in China, we welcome the adoption of this resolution and would like to express the group's sincere thanks to the facilitator of this resolution, Mr. Bob Sien Tam of Singapore, for his tremendous efforts in facilitating the negotiations. We'd also like to thank all our partners for their constructive engagement and flexibilities shown in the process. We appreciate, of course, the untiring support of the Secretariat in this regard. Mr. Chairman, the group welcomes the substantive content of this year's resolution. We particularly welcome the offer to host the Habitat 3 conference by the government of Ecuador, as well as the proclamation of the World Cities Day. The group stresses the importance of providing adequate resources to enhance the effectiveness of UN Habitat in carrying out its mandate. We would like to take this opportunity to assure our partners that the group will honor the political agreement reached during the negotiations at the informal meetings of this committee. In this regard, we reaffirm Governing Council of UN Habitat in its resolution 24/14 of 19 April 2013 on the inputs and support required for the preparatory process of the Third United Nations Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development, or Habitat 3, to be met by regular budget and voluntary contributions. We further encourage the Secretary General to seek voluntary support for this purpose and call upon Member States to provide such support. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Je remercie le représentant de...
I thank the representative of Fiji for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me join those who express condolences of the demise of the great statesman Nelson Mandela of South Africa on behalf of my delegation. Here in my capacity as the Vice Chair in charge of this draft resolution on habitat, I wish to convey my gratitude to Mr. Tham Wok Sin, the First Secretary of the Permanent Mission of Singapore, for his generous effort to facilitate this rather difficult resolution, as he expressed in his remarks. His efficiency, as well as the constructive engagement of all negotiating partners, as well as the flexibility in the last minute, made this process a success, and that's why we could adopt it today, even with a lot of hardships. I also thank Ms. Amina Jakta of the UN Habitat Secretariat for her continuous assistance during this endeavor. Finally, I thankfully remind the valuable contribution of the Budget Division of the Secretariat on this draft resolution. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Je remercie le vice-président de la Commission.
I thank the Vice Chair for his statement.
Présent, je souhaite donner...
I now give the floor to the representative of the European Union.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chairman, I have the honour to take the floor on behalf of the European Union and its member states.
its member states have joined consensus on draft resolution L61. We would like to express our sincere gratitude to the facilitator, Mr. Bob Sien Tam from Singapore, for his able guidance and constant energy to lead us through these negotiations, as well as to our negotiation partners, and especially to the G77 representative, Ms. Yolinda Chan from Fiji, for their extremely constructive involvement at all stages of negotiations. We equally thank the Secretariat and Ms. Yamina Jakta. The European Union and its member states are major partners of UN Habitat and committed to the substantial issue of urban settlements and sustainable urban development. While urbanization has a key role in poverty reduction, the continuing rapid urbanization also makes the creation of sustainable cities critical, and we need a holistic approach to urban development, one that promotes economically prosperous, safe and socially inclusive, as well as environmentally sustainable cities. This conceptual approach is well reflected in UN Habitat's current strategy and work program addressing the components of urban planning and design, housing and slums upgrading, and basic urban services, urban economy legislation and governance, underpinned by research and capacity development. The European Union and its member states are clearly supportive to this work. We warmly welcome the substantial elements added to this year's resolution, building on the outcome of the Governing Council, and emphasizing some of the key conditions and components for realizing sustainable urban development, including and especially on gender equality and women's empowerment, or the participation of local authorities in the promotion of sustainable urbanization and settlements. We also welcome the proclamation of a World Cities Day through this resolution, which has the potential to raise awareness on the crucial role that cities have for poverty eradication and sustainable development. The EU and its member states also wish to reiterate their strong commitment to the third UN Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development and to its preparatory process in the most inclusive, efficient, effective and improved manner. We had committed through last year's resolution that we would, next year, decide on the remaining elements of the preparatory process, and in this regard, this year's resolution already provides useful additional guidance ahead of next year's considerations. Mr. Chair, although our common commitment to UN Habitat, to the upcoming conference, and to the substantial issue of urban settlements and sustainable urban development is clear, we are dismayed and disappointed at the program budget implications of the present resolution and at the unclear process that led to it, which raises serious concerns. Our understanding of the last words of OP 14 of last year's resolution and of paragraph 6 of the oral statement by the Secretariat in connection with its adoption was that the Secretary General would revert on the possible additional resource requirement, if any, once the Governing Council would decide on the matter. Since the Governing Council adopted a very clear decision on the matter through its resolution 2414 of 19 April 2013, we fail to understand why no provision for such requirements was included in the initial proposed budget for 2014-15, nor do we understand why the requirements were not elaborated in a revised budget proposal. Having been informed of the possibility of this program budget implication relatively early in the process of negotiations of AL14, we engaged constructively and spared no efforts during very lengthy negotiations in order to find appropriate language that would satisfy all parties. The compromise OP4 that was carefully crafted in the presence of the Secretariat clearly and unequivocally affirms that the resources needs were to be met by regular budget and voluntary contributions. Thus, just like the distinguished representative of Fiji on behalf of G77, we do not understand why the PBI statement omits the use of voluntary contributions, which was decided by the consensus of member states, and we would request that our frustration at the handling of this issue to be noted for the record. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Je remercie le représentant.
I thank the representative of the European Union for that statement, and I'd now like to give the floor to the representative of the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The United States joins all the global voices in sympathy to South Africa for the loss of former President Nelson Mandela. Mr. Chairman, the United States has been and will remain a supporter of the work and mandate of UN Habitat. Together with the international community, we note the progress made on the Istanbul Declaration of Human Settlements, while also recognizing the need for continued focus on urban development and its challenges. As such, we note the importance of the Habitat conferences and look forward to working with the UN Secretariat on ensuring Habitat 3 achieves productive, efficient, and effective outcomes. To that end, my delegation is pleased to note the resolution's stance on supporting the ongoing review of UN Habitat with the aim to improve transparency, accountability, efficiency, and effectiveness. We are also pleased that this theme continues in the paragraph about the Habitat 3 conference preparations. We thank the facilitator, Borg Sian Tam of Singapore, and other delegations who worked to reach a consensus on this resolution. However, the United States is dismayed and disappointed at the confusion and apparent missteps surrounding the budget process that then plagued negotiation of this resolution. Starting at the 67th session of the UN General Assembly and continuing through UN Habitat's 24 Governing Council, the United States clearly stated our expectation that Habitat would include funds related to Habitat 3 as part of its overall request for the 2014-2015 biennium. From our discussions with UN Habitat, we understood that the organization would follow this course of action. The UN Habitat Governing Council adopted Decision 24/14 in this regard in April this year, yet no provision was made either in the initial proposed budget or in a revised budget. The present resolution makes clear that the majority of the resources should come from voluntary contributions. In addition, therefore, the figures specified in L53 can only be considered as initial estimates of the overall resources needed, and as such do not prejudge discussions by member states in the Fifth Committee and should not be perceived as having the endorsement of member states. While we remain firmly committed to the purpose and process of the Habitat 3 conference in 2016, we are deeply disappointed by the non-transparent aspects of the budget process, which has deprived us of fully understanding, questioning, and openly debating the budgetary implications of this request. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Je remercie Madame la représentante.
I thank the representative of the United States, and I now give the floor to Japan, the representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, my delegation would also like to express condolences to the people of South Africa for the loss of former President Nelson Mandela. Mr. Chairman, my delegation would like to thank the facilitator, Mr. Borg Sian Tam, for all his hard work and tremendous effort to lead us to the adoption of the draft resolution A/C2/68/L61 entitled Implementation of the Outcome of the United Nations Conference on Human Settlement and Strengthening of the United Nations Human Settlement Program. I would also like to express my gratitude to all the other delegations for the flexibility they have shown throughout the process of negotiation. My delegation is pleased to join the consensus today, and we are happy to see that many paragraphs related to gender and women empowerment, to which the government of Japan attached great importance, were included in the resolution. At the same time, however, we must express our deep disappointment and concern regarding the budgetary issue. It is quite regrettable that this resolution triggered a program budget implication in a way that many delegations had not expected, and that the information given to the member states throughout the process of discussion of both last year's resolution in New York and the Governing Council resolution in Nairobi in April was insufficient. We still believe that this PBI could have been avoided if sufficient relevant information on budgetary implications had been given to the member states in a clear and timely manner at every step of those two discussions. My delegation sincerely hopes that the thought of this situation will not happen again, and recognize the need to improve the current practice and working method for PBI, which currently only continue to cause confusion. Lastly, my delegation strongly urges that the total amount of the PBI entailed in this resolution should ultimately be reduced, and that the part of the resource necessary for the preparatory process of UN Habitat 3 should be met by the voluntary contribution as described in OP4 in the resolution and as emphasized by the previous speakers, including Mr. Facilitator and distinguished representative of Fiji on behalf of G77 plus China. I thank you.
Je remercie Madame la représentante.
I thank the representative of Japan for that statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Canada. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The delegation would also like to express its condolences to the people of South Africa and the international community with respect to the passing of former South African President Nelson Mandela, one of the world's great moral leaders and statesmen. Mr. Chairman, Canada is pleased to join consensus on Resolution A/C2/68/L61, entitled Implementation of the Outcome of the United Nations Conference on Human Settlements, Habitat 2, and Strengthening of the United Nations Settlements Program, UN Habitat. We would also like to express our gratitude to the facilitator, the distinguished delegate of Singapore, for his leadership throughout our consultations. Canada believes that this resolution builds positively on last year's resolution and advances the process for the realization of the Third United Nations Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development, Habitat 3, in 2016. However, like others, Canada is concerned about the content of the statement submitted by the Secretary General in accordance with Rule 153 of the Rules of Procedure of the General Assembly, A/C2/68/L53, specifically with respect to operative paragraph 4 of the resolution. We also question the decision to omit the resource requirements of UN Habitat Governing Council Decision 24/14 in the regular budget of the UN, and the decision to present further program budgetary implications to the second committee. Canada would like to stress that the figures presented in this statement are estimates and will be subject to examination in the fifth committee, in keeping with the rules and regulations of the organization. Canada intends to participate actively in these deliberations. Canada asks that this explanation of position be reflected in the official records. Thank you.
Je remercie Madame la
I thank the representative of Canada for her statement. In light of the adoption of Draft Resolution L61, may I take it that the Draft Resolution L14 is withdrawn by its sponsors?
Il semble que les auteurs du L14 n'y voient pas d'inconvénient.
I hear no objection. It is so decided. The committee has thus concluded its consideration of Agenda Item 20.
J'invite maintenant la Commission à reprendre l'examen du point.
I now invite the committee to resume its consideration of Agenda Item 21C in order to take action on the draft resolution entitled Development Cooperation with Middle-Income Countries, which is before you in document AC2-68L65, and submitted by the distinguished Vice Chair, Mr. Warunashri Dhanapala of Sri Lanka, on the basis of informal consultations on draft resolution L35. In this connection, I wish to consult the committee with a view to proceeding immediately to take action on draft resolution L65. Since the document has only been circulated this morning, it would be necessary to waive the relevant provision of Rule 120 of the Rules of Procedure of the General Assembly. Unless I hear any objection, I will take it that the committee agrees with this proposal. It is so decided.
J'informe la Commission.
I would like to inform the committee that draft resolution L65 contains no program budget implications.
Est-ce que Monsieur Edouard
Does the facilitator, Mr. Eduardo Poretti of Argentina, wish to make a statement?
Monsieur Poretti, on m'a dit qu'il est bien dans la salle. Vous avez la.
Mr. Poretti, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just very briefly, we wish to thank all of the delegations that took part in this very complex negotiation procedure. And in particular, thanks to the colleagues from the G77 in China who put forth very substantive text, but thanks also to the other countries and groups that were very responsible in allowing for positive exchange so that this draft resolution on cooperation, development cooperation with middle income countries, which also addresses other substantive matters in the development agenda. It was thanks to these efforts that this could be adopted. I wish to also like to make a short mention to OP. I'm reading it right now. It will be paragraph OP 11. I apologize, says the speaker. Preambular 11. I'm sorry. Allow me a moment. Preambular 11, which in English says, stressing that middle-income countries continue to face particular challenges, inter alia related to jobs creation, the diversification and transformation of their economies. There I would like to include the word and access to international markets, and in this regard, that efforts to create a national enabling environment, etc. That would be the correction, the addition of the word and. It's an oral correction that I wish to make right now in this preambular paragraph. That's all I wish to say right now, except to thank again those delegations that took a role in the work. This text is of great importance to my delegation and for the delegations of the G77 in China. Thank you very much.
Je remercie M. Poretti.
I thank Mr. Poretti for his efforts and for participating in drafting this text. I also thank all those other delegations that were participating in that negotiating process.
Une délégation qui souhaite faire des observations.
Are there any comments on draft resolution L65 as orally corrected by Mr. Poretti?
Il semble que non.
It would appear not. May I take it that the committee is ready to adopt resolution L65 as orally corrected?
Il n'y a pas d'objection.
I hear no objection. Draft resolution L65 as orally corrected is adopted.
Une délégation qui souhaite faire une déclaration.
Does any delegation wish to make a statement after the adoption of draft resolution L65? Colombia is asking for the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Colombia affords great importance to the discussion on cooperation for development or development cooperation with middle-income countries in the United Nations, particularly at a time when we are discussing what will be a post-2015 development agenda of a universal nature, and in which we must enshrine the needs and aspirations of all developing countries. Along these lines, my delegation underscores the particular relevance of the resolution on cooperation with middle-income countries that this committee has just adopted. The text adopted was the result of an arduous and extensive negotiation process. For this reason, I should like to express my appreciation for the dedication and effort of the delegations of Costa Rica, Barbados, and China, as well as Argentina. The resolution recognizes the need to develop a concept of development that is broad and multifaceted, and requests of the system of the United Nations to respond to the many needs of development needs of the middle-income countries in a coordinated manner through a precise evaluation of priorities and needs of these countries based on variables that go beyond merely income. This resolution reflects significant progress toward the creation of a broad strategic framework in the area of cooperation with developing countries, and or rather development in middle-income countries in the United Nations system. It includes a plan of action and mechanisms for coordination and follow-up. At the center of the debate is the pressing need not merely to eradicate the high levels of poverty in our countries, but also to effectively face the structural problems faced by middle-income countries when it comes to attaining sustainable development, becoming, in this way, more inclusive and equitable societies. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Je remercie le représentant.
I thank the representative of Colombia for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Costa Rica.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chairman. As co-coordinator of this draft resolution, I should like to very much thank all of the colleagues that have taken a role in this difficult process, negotiation, and in particular Barbados and Colombia. A special appreciation goes to Mr. Eduardo Boretti of the Argentine delegation for his professionalism, for his clarity, and for his hard work and dedication throughout this process. I should also like to underscore, Chairman, numerous elements of this document which has just been adopted. First, this is the first time in this forum that we make a clear requirement of the United Nations system when it comes to addressing the need for development in the middle-income countries in a coordinated manner using variables to go beyond per capita income. It also underscores the possibility of using a structural approach for better understanding the needs of middle-income countries based on the valuable experiences of Latin America. It also recognizes the solidarity that has always existed among middle-income countries and LDCs. Last, Chair, we have just asked the Secretary General to provide a report that includes recommendations and proposals that bear in mind the multidimensional nature of poverty and development in such a way as to ensure cooperation with middle-income countries that is efficient, effective, better focused, and better coordinated. All of this, Chair, are substantial steps forward toward development cooperation with middle-income countries. These decisions, we are certain, will better help to understand and in a more comprehensive manner the complexity of the development processes in middle-income countries as well as the global phenomenon of poverty and development itself. My delegation, then, welcomes the adoption of this important resolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the representative of Costa Rica for his statement. And now I should like to give the floor to the representative of Belarus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'd like to join in expressing our condolences to South Africa in connection with the passing of a world leader, Nelson Mandela. Mr. Chairman, today a genuinely extraordinary event has occurred in the UN's history. For the first time in the history of this organization, a substantive and action-oriented resolution has been adopted on cooperation with middle-income countries. For the first time, a decision has been taken to develop cooperation with middle-income countries. And the issue of cooperation with these countries, where most people of the world live now, will be considered under a specially established agenda of the UN General Assembly. Belarus, as a middle-income country, welcomes the adoption of the resolution entitled Development Cooperation with Middle-Income Countries. And we intend to actively cooperate with all interested parties to fully implement it. We trust that today's decision will significantly help to systematize and enhance the coordination of cooperation with this category of countries, not only within the UN, but also through other international organizations as well. Ultimately, this should lead to a more effective and better targeted use of resources for development purposes, and will support and promote the level of development that middle-income countries have attained today. the process of systematizing cooperation with middle-income countries in the United Nations is beneficial to all member states. As a result of this process, donors will have a clear and transparent picture of the resource basis for the development of cooperation with middle-income countries, and they can assess their needs. The least developed countries, for their part, for whom cooperation in various areas with middle-income countries has already long been an integral part of development, they will now have a clear set of guidelines and best practices towards transitioning towards a higher category for development. Sir, the text of the resolution adopted today was a result of difficult but constructive negotiations. We should like to express our gratitude to the coordinator of the resolution, the distinguished representative of Argentina, Edward Poretti, and the other participants in the consultations for the positive attitude which resulted in the adoption of an important and necessary resolution. Thank you.
Je remercie le représentant de
I'd just like to thank the delegate of Belarus for that statement. I would now like to give the floor to the representative of Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, again, and please give me